2, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10.
So I'll just find Richard.
Well, we're one short. We passed the other resolution anyway, so it just means we're not quite in. Right. Welcome everyone. Mark and Jackie and Nick. Welcome. Mark, shoot.
Thanks, Councillor. It's good to be here at my first meeting as chair of AT.
Oh, yes, sorry, I forgot about that.
Yes,
You're
it's
welcome. Congratulations.
been 3 months in the seat now, and I've spent a bit of time getting up to speed with everything that's going on, of which there is a lot. But just a couple of introductory remarks. I just interested, our purpose is to create quality jobs for all Aucklanders. And quite a sort of a bit of motherhood statement, but it's very focused for us in terms of what we do and what we don't do. And we're going to be spending the next 12 months really honing down that work and the strategy in terms of what we do and what we don't do. So that's quite critical to us, particularly in light of the cross-cutting themes, the three themes that we've got, which is supporting Maori economic development, spatial, so for all Aucklanders as opposed to some Aucklanders, and under a sort of a sustainability type umbrella as well. So look, there's quite a lot of things that we're going to be doing. I mean, we've got a couple of very large events coming up that we need to be very clear about how we actually deliver those. And there's a lot of other smaller things that we do as well. And so we're sort of focused over the next 12 months, particularly on delivery and of repurposing the organisation. And the organisation under Nick for the last 12 months has gone through a strategic realignment and certainly a consolidation of resources, and we continue to do that. And the other thing that I'm pretty keen on personally is sort of making sure that we're part of the council family and making sure that we use those resources wisely as well. And I continue to work with the chairs of the other CCOs to see whether we can get a lot more efficient at that sort of thing as well, so we don't duplicate. But anyway, look, I'll hand straight over to Nick and he'll take us through his presentation. Thank you.
Welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Mark. The presentation I'm just going to give you shortly is just focusing on some highlights really from the last 3-6 months of things we've delivered and things that we are concentrating on for the next few months. But before I do that, because I'm taking as read the Q2 report that we provided and officers have commented on. But before I do that, it's just worth briefly touching on the tragic events in Christchurch on Friday and what that actually means for AT. We are quite immediately affected. As you're probably aware, the Pacifica Festival, we made the call yesterday not to proceed with that, and that was on the advice of police to say that they were not able to support it. So we are having to be quite immediately responsive to some of the challenges that the events create, but also probably being realistic looking forward. The security and the cost associated with major events may well be affected by the experiences from last week. So just turning to the presentation, there are three things I just want to highlight from the last quarter that have been delivered by AT. The first is this tourism campaign. I'm going to briefly show you a video. This was meant to be launched yesterday, but we decided not to proceed with the event in light of events last week. But this campaign on Go with Tourism is targeting young people into the tourism industry. It's something that goes to the Destination AKL strategy that was developed with the industry last year. It's a priority to find the skills for the industry, and it's a key role for Auckland. This campaign has been developed with the industry, with the likes of Sky City, the accommodation sector, and other providers. So if we go to the video.
What I love about tourism is it celebrates diversity and culture.
Helping people accomplish a bungee jump, I get a huge thrill from that.
What I really love is the variety of my job, the opportunity to express myself.
I love educating them about what we have here on Waiheke and just showing them a lot of fun.
It's like a second home for me. I'm 8 years in now and still loving it. They say that if you find a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Go with tourism.
The campaign is very much targeting the fact that tourism has kind of a bad reputation with young people. It's sort of seen as hospo, doesn't go anywhere, where in reality, when you understand what the industry offers, the range of roles, the potential careers, right through into starting your own business, the industry and ATID are very keen that we work to present those opportunities, working with the development of skills and so on, as part of the Destination AKL strategy. So that was the first thing that we've done, that we are in the process of delivering for you. The second thing I just want to highlight, Grid AKL, this is not new, you understand that, but 12 months ago, we were here talking about the risks of BizDojo collapsing, the fact that it was at a precarious position. Well, I want to say to you today that Grid AKL is absolutely flourishing. Right now, we are being squeezed for space. We are looking at further developments, not ATID, not the council, but our partners like Precinct Properties are looking at developing the next building as people start to overflow from Madden Street and Larside Street. That is part of the grid at the moment. And if you go back to the original thinking behind the council and ATID's role in this was that we had in the middle of the city an innovation precinct that was like a beacon to technology, to innovation in the middle of the city. It wasn't crowded out by corporates and more corporate head offices, but in fact, it was bringing young people, entrepreneurs and so on into the heart of the city. And that is what is happening right now. So I just wanted to highlight, given that 12 months ago, we were facing some serious financial and litigation risks, we have completely put all that behind us, and we're now really looking at the next phase, which is to consider, well, what role do we play from here going forward, because we've achieved an outcome that was part of the original vision. The third thing I want to touch on is Elemental, the winter festival that was announced in a soft launch at the end of last month. This is important for a number of reasons. I think it highlights progress we've made with the new APTR, the accommodation provider targeted rate, the fact that we now have a committee of the board with the accommodation sector as part of that, and with that stream of funding, with that governance arrangement, what that's doing is driving that sector's priorities a lot more clearly and a lot more coherently within ATID. And for the accommodation sector, the winter bed nights is their prime objective. This festival is targeting July for a month to bring people to Auckland, but it's building on a lot of existing activities, a lot of existing festivals and events, and drawing together under a single banner. We went and advertised to Aucklanders, inviting them to bring forward events and opportunities that might be part of this festival. We were completely overwhelmed with what we received. The budget had to be more than doubled to take advantage of the opportunities that have come forward. So we're very excited about the development of this, and you will see more later next month when we go through the full launch. One of the important things about this, Mark mentioned more spatial, it actually will have a footprint much more broadly across Auckland, less focused on just the CBD, but how do we activate and draw people to other parts of Auckland. So those are three things that we've delivered in the last 3 months. If we look forward, the immediate things now that we are concentrating on delivering in the next few months, Manukau is, there are a lot of activities going on. We are not a leader in the development of Manukau, but we do bring an economic lens, and we do bring some skills and a perspective that is can help the way in which Manukau develops. So there are, you'll see listed there, 7 things that we're currently active in working with Manukau. The development of the Jobs and Skills Hub, the creative industries. We've been very active in working with Te Papa on bringing Te Papa North to Auckland, to Manukau. As part of that, we see it as a great opportunity with creative industries, and we've undertaken research which will be very valuable irrespective of whether Te Papa proceeds around understanding what the opportunities are in Manukau. Industry 4 is actually Industry 4.0. That's the future of manufacturing. We're working with a number of parties on that. That has significant implications for Mount Wellington and South Wiri. The green economy, that's the circular economy work that we've done. Investment attraction is part of our core job. Tourism development, and looking at bringing together industry leaders around Manukau and the opportunities. So this is a broad set of activities that we're involved in, but it is evidence of our shift in focus towards a much more spatial view of Auckland. Film attraction, I'll quickly jump through because I realise I'm taking longer than I'd planned, but globally, the film industry is going through significant restructuring around streaming services. There is a drive for content. There is a lack of infrastructure for production and post-production. There's a huge opportunity for Auckland. We have more demand than we can meet, and we're working very actively on the development of future film infrastructure and taking advantage of those opportunities. The kinds of jobs that come from the screen sector are precisely the kinds of jobs, when we talk about quality jobs, that we're interested in. There are a broad range of people. When you think about the future of work, it is the creative industries where there is expected to be growth. So attracting these kinds of industries to Auckland is very important, and we do think we can add value to that industry. Auckland's destination narrative. This is part of 2021. Mark mentioned the big events. If we're to leverage America's Cup and APEC as a city, we need to be clear about what the cities represents, what it is that we want to say about Auckland. This piece of work, which again we're doing with the visitor sector and the industry, has been looking at how do Aucklanders describe what's great about Auckland, how do people who visit here perceive Auckland, and what do we say about Auckland in the materials that people see. But also what it highlights is Auckland is dominated by the story about New Zealand. So people come to Auckland and they expect to see countryside, they expect to see lakes, they expect to see sheep. And when you look at the material we produce for Auckland, it doesn't show people. It doesn't show that this is an urban centre with the kinds of things you would expect in an urban centre in terms of business, technology, fine wine and food, and the kinds of cultural experiences. So we think there's some real opportunities here, and we will certainly be spending more time with you and with other partners on developing this ahead of 2021. Lastly, tripartite. You'll be familiar with the fact that Auckland, Guangzhou and LA have signed for the second time an agreement to work as 3 cities around trade and economic development. Auckland will host the tripartite delegations in May this year. We are working right now on making the most of that opportunity, and the idea is that we will line it up with Tech Week and emphasise or present the technology sector in Auckland alongside creative industries. So that will be the focus of tripartite. Delivering ongoing efficiency, quickly whip through this. I think AT certainly proportionally is the greatest user of shared services in the council. We, as Mark said, see ourselves very much as the part of the council family. We don't have any pride about using other people, if they can help us, if they're more efficient and more effective, we're very happy to be part of the council family in that regard. We're also working to, where we have investments, very mindful that we see ourselves as a transitionary owner and look to exit as far as we can. So currently we're in the Grid, we're in the AR/VR Garage, the Food Bowl and Film Studios, and all of those we have plans around how we expect to exit. Some of those are more advanced than others. Just briefly, we came to the council about a year ago looking for some funding to move buildings. We were asked to, reluctantly, we were granted the funding, the capital. I think that the sum we sought was 3.2 million. We were asked to come in less than 3 million. Well, I can tell you we came in at 2.8. But more importantly than that, we moved in on time, under budget, but that the office we've moved into will save the council 6 million on the life of the lease, as opposed to staying where we had been, comparing to historically what our accommodation cost has been. But probably most importantly, the environment we've created is far more conducive to the work we do, and that the engagement of staff has benefited significantly from that. And we've done it in a smart and very cost-effective way by reusing materials and so on. One point that is really important with our move is that we've embraced the concept of Ngā Hau e Whā, the Four Winds of Auckland, as being the theme of our place in Auckland and the role that we have as AET. And that's represented sort of in a very physical sense in the office. Financial, I don't mean to jump past this. Currently, we're running behind on our budget. This was at the end of December. We expect to finish pretty much, land the jumbo jet on the aircraft carrier on the 30th of June. So we don't expect anything outside of our budget. And lastly, KPIs, as we've talked about previously here, we've been doing a lot of work around developing KPIs. Previously, we had 28. They were a broad range of things, some very micro, like website hits, through to things that were very macro that we didn't really control, like claiming attribution for hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of GDP creation by investment in Auckland. So we've been working to narrow it down to 5 that we think are credible, measurable, and we would like to think will give a much better measure of our effectiveness as a business. We're making good progress on how we measure those. Some of them are very much being benchmarked this year for the first time. Some of them, or a couple of them, we've measured previously, but happy to take any feedback on our KPIs. I think with that, that's my last slide. Oh, sorry, risks. Briefly, you can see what those are there. AC36 host venue agreement. I understand on Friday, negotiations on that have pretty much concluded, and we are confident there will be an agreement a signed agreement in the next couple of weeks. APTR judicial review, that's the targeted rate. That's an action from the accommodation sector with the council. It affects you guys more directly than it does us, but we are concerned about any financial implications from that. And the convention centre delay, that has been an enormously challenging issue around sequencing or winning events for Auckland, as the timing of that has pushed out. We have a very good relationship with Sky City. We are pretty confident that we get the best information, but it remains a high risk, mainly reputationally for Auckland, where we're out there trying to persuade people to bring large conventions, and then we have to house them, or they have to go elsewhere. Thank you.
Right. Well, having been through Hokitika last week, where the Wild Foods Festival was about to start, with their mountain oysters has been prominent. Now I noticed a photo of a broccoli bun sandwich in your presentation. It shows the difference between Auckland and the West Coast, I think. The legal challenge. It is ironic that you started your presentation by pointing out the work you're doing to encourage tourism, employment and growth in that area and to benefit the hotels. So that's not even anything to do with the targeted rate, but here you are, put a big chunk of that, and then at the same time those same entities are challenging us. How is the relationship of the informal committee or whatever it is? How is that going? And
I mean, I think that at a working level, our relationship with the industry, I'm probably not completely qualified to say this, has probably never been better. The arrangements that have been put in place around having representatives in the committee of the board has gone through a sort of a teething period where they have wanted to get their heads around our budget and want to understand where we spend the money. That's been healthy for ATEED, I can say, because I think they bring a dose of reality. On the other hand, I think they would recognise that they've learned a lot. And now the relationship, I would say, is a very good working relationship. And I think Mark, who's joined the show more recently, would agree that we have a good working relationship, and I think we're finding a good way of working together. So there's a degree of irony that we're in court, but at a working level, I think we're in very good shape.
And just to add something to that, I have fully engaged personally on that, and I think the industry has seen that as a good signal, and they can directly talk to me about their issues, and it's not just in subcommittee. We do a lot of work in subcommittees and committees of the board and things like that, but they see that as a good signal right from the start. So that's.
Okay. Before I pass to Councillor Fletcher and then Councillor Casey, just Kumi Film Studios, can you just explain who owns what there? I mean, I thought it was a totally private enterprise set up there, but are we investing and therefore is someone leasing? What is the arrangement there? We know what it is at Henderson. But...
Right, so it's owned privately by the Root family. Mm-hmm. We took a head lease, I think probably about 3 years ago, that is reasonably complex, but so we effectively have been underwriting the revenue for the film studio, But that was to underwrite the development of sound stages out there, and currently we're making money on it.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure whether you were present when Panuku were here, because I get a bit frustrated that there are some things we deal with the appointments committee of directors and so forth, and some here, some at the planning committee, but I would really welcome at some point the opportunity for us to have a more general discussion on some of the issues, and we'll have it, I'm sure, with the statement of intent, Mr. Chairman, but it's just where the relationship can break down unintentionally, where there might be issues. For an example, our joint purpose is to create jobs for Aucklanders. So we're all trying to do that. But then at the same time, we'll become very upset if ATEED want to withdraw funding for the Santa Parade. Or we might, it might suddenly be then Diwali. It might be, if we can't see those measurements of bed nights associated with events. So how do you see us, in what forum can we actually have a conversation about these things where common sense applies? And you can say, look, we think this is terrific, but we just can't do it. So, we can have a discussion. I applaud you on the practical manner with which you resolved the issue with regards to the Santa Parade. That was really commendable. But we're going to have this time and time again, and I can see the relationship breaking down time and time again. So I guess I don't know that you will want me doing a deep dive in this today, Mr. Chair, but I would like us to have the opportunity for a sensible discussion about it and how we can move forward. Secondly, as somebody who supported central government and over 20 years advocated for an entertainment, a tourism tax. I have frustrations with the targeted accommodation rate. I have frustrations that we've provided exemptions where I don't think exemptions should exist. And I'd like to have that conversation. I realise it's before, a judicial review and perhaps the sensitivity around discussing that. But how can and where do we have that discussion to find a resolution to some of these things? So, Mr. Chair, if you want to rule my questions out of order for now, I'm quite understanding, but certainly on the ones around the bed nights generated and the events and those things that Aucklanders hold dear and are really precious, especially at difficult times like now, the things that we, celebrate and want to enjoy. How you must have board discussions at an informal level on how we might resolve these things.
I'm not quite sure what the best process going forward is, but I can say that there's a lot of things that ATEED has done over the past 8 years, which a lot of different things. And one thing we're trying to do over the next 12 months is to really focus our strategy in terms of what it is that we as a group jointly agree that we're going to do. And then sometimes that sort of lends itself to something like, well, this doesn't create bed nights, therefore it's not in. That's where the board actually comes back in again and says, well, that may be correct, but from a holistic perspective, this is where the board sees the right decision. And so that's just a discussion between the board and the executive at that stage. But look, we'd welcome having a more casual conversation in our strategy development with councillors or a subcommittee of the councillors on how that could work. We're happy to do that.
Well, may I suggest that you moved into new headquarters, and I don't think, the councillors have seen it, and we have seen the old ones. You've had events down there occasionally. Maybe you should coordinate something down at your new headquarters. Sure. You do a presentation, and it's just more informal. Watercare do it. Some of the others do it. So,
yeah, probably over the next, we'll be in a position over the next few months to actually start that conversation.
Right, Councillor Casey, I think, and Councillor Bartle.
I've got 4 questions. I'll be quick. I'll just take up the Santa Claus and say, first, Santa Claus, haha, Santa Claus. Santa Claus.
Yes.
Thank you for reconsidering the funding for that. But what it's done for me is to make me look very closely at your statement of intent and all the documents that you produce, including this quarterly report. And what I feel is the language that you use the word residents in this quarterly report once. And that really concerns me. And I think it's at heart of the issue with Santa, is that we as a council want to create a good city for residents. And it seems to me that your focus is on international and domestic visitors. That's people coming into Auckland. And, even the way you reported on the fireworks, Aotea Square, you're proudly saying that we've got media coverage throughout the world. Fantastic. But you also had thousands and thousands of residents out their homes from all over Auckland into Aotea Square. That was fantastic too. For me, as important, if not more important than your international coverage. So the balance between the public good and all those other really important marketing and strategic things that you're doing to create jobs, I think needs to be, and like Chris, I think we need to talk about that. Because Santa highlighted that for me as something out of kilter here. So just leave that. Thank you very much for putting it back. I'm interested, here's my specific questions. What's your budget line for the City for Music? How much money are you intent on putting into the City for Music strategy in terms of events or anything, right? Third one is, what exactly is your relationship with the National Convention Centre? Given that we have a host of excellent facilities that RFA manage, what is it that you're doing for the National Convention Centre, and what any financial transaction between the two of you I'm interested in too. And finally, Nick, in your first weeks in the job, we met and we talked about how important it was to tell the story of Auckland from a Maori perspective, and our Maunga, the untold story still exists. And what you told us today is that you still want to talk to us about that. So I'm interested in how you're getting to the end of it. We've got a UNESCO bid, the Monga Authority are working in the same spot. What are you doing to make sure that we get that story told? What's your role in that? And it's not talking to us, because I don't have the story, but Mana Whenua do. There you go.
Maybe I'll start on the last one first while Jackie counts up all the small budgets we've got for the music one. So the stuff around the destination narrative, one of the insights that's come back from that, and it's not a surprise, is that what people who visit Auckland really value is an experience that's unique. And one of the things that's clearly unique about Auckland and New Zealand is our biculturalism and the modern Maori representation of that, which is, it's not about the sort of the traditional coach trip to Rotorua for haka and poi dancing. It's actually what New Zealand is as a country today, and the history through the treaty, how you actually experience the manaakitanga and the kinds of values that New Zealand displays, and at the heart of that is an experience of what Maori means today in Auckland. And that is going to be one of the core themes that come through the destination narrative. What and how is that represented in Auckland? And that can only be taken forward with Mana Whenua and doing it in a way that is owned and is authentic with Mana Whenua. So that will develop. But we are already doing a lot in terms of the Maori story. I think with Te Matatini, for example, we are working with Air New Zealand, who have partnered now with Te Matatini, and they did it in Wellington this year, and they will do it going forward. But what they are talking about is using te reo and describing Auckland as Tamaki Makaurau, and what we're doing is working with them is to say, how do we build those themes and that language much more into the experience of coming to the city. That's just two important immediate examples, but more broadly, we do think that it's fundamental to tell that story. The third point you asked was NZICC. What is our relationship with NZICC? The International Convention Centre. We have the business, what do we call it? The group that attracts business conventions to Auckland. They are funded partly through the accommodation provider targeted rate. And Sky City as accommodation provider is contributing to that. Other than that, we don't have a direct relationship with them. The interest is, it's like bringing other major events to Auckland. The fact that they come here, they bring a whole lot of other activity. So the role we play is very much like we do around major events and funded in the same way. The first one, sorry.
Just to be very, so we don't have any commercial relationship with the ICC?
No.
Just to be very clear.
Or Sky City. The music budget, I don't have a number for you today, and I'm happy to give it to you when I pull the numbers together. It'll be small, unfortunately. And I've got guitar, cufflinks on. I'm a muso. I think the Music City is fantastic. I've been pushing really hard around the importance of music. And one of the things that came through in that destination narrative research was actually music features very highly in it. So we are very keen to promote music, but we have a very limited budget, and I'm not quite sure what we can rob to put more into it, but it certainly is a priority, even on a personal level.
Well, just finish off then, maybe it goes back to what Chris said earlier. We need a dialogue, because I personally think that you should be funding the City for Music. I think it's one of the best things to happen in Auckland for a very long time. And maybe we need to talk about where your priorities are in terms of shifting funds within your programmes. Happy to do that.
Councillors, we are running well over half an hour's late now, so I've got Councillor Bartley and then Councillor Lee, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Thank you for your presentation. It was good to hear that your office move has gone well and within budget, because I didn't support your request for more money, so I'm glad to hear it's gone well for you. I wanted to ask you whether you felt you got your vision right 6 months into operation, because it does seem like it's more about tourism and out of that comes jobs, as opposed to you guys being, your vision is about jobs. Because to me, that would take in employment relations, it would take in, you know, the social side. Do you think you've got your vision right?
Well, it's something that the board has certainly, now that I've joined the board, and we are going to go through a bit of a refresh of the board this year, the board is very keen to revisit what creating jobs and the spatial nature of those jobs around Auckland actually means. And look, I think that in some respects, the strategy and the actions that we've taken over the past X years have sort of just grown up, and we've done them. But the board this year is specifically looking at re-looking at all of that purpose, vision, the words around it, the way it gets portrayed, and the way we communicate that to the community of Auckland as well. So look, we've got some specific work programs in place right now, which are coming back to the board over the next couple of months. And like we said before, we're happy to share some of those conversations with you as we redevelop them. But yes, there will be a redevelopment of those words.
If I could just, sorry, just add to that. I mean, we ended up there because we said, why do you have an economic development agency? It's about prosperity, which actually comes down to productivity, which actually comes down to jobs. And then we said, what are the things that ATEED can do that nobody else does? So fundamentally, businesses and private sector invest in jobs. If that doesn't work, you have the government. We need to be clear about the bits that we can add value to that are worth doing, that are part of why a council would fund it. So that's the part that when Mark talks about it, we need to get that a lot clearer. The tourism piece is very important because there's a clear role for an agency like us to play in that. But how we get into the harder, longer term job aspect of that, we definitely have more work to do.
Thank you. One more question, please, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask about your expenses, because your expenses are lower, right? So are they going to catch up in the second half of the year? Is that right? You just have too much money.
No, we don't. So there has been, so that budget was actually set in November 2017, and we've gone through that reorganisation in the past 12 months prior. So we've gone through a recent forecasting exercise, and we will land within that budget. So it's definitely rephased towards the latter part of the second half of the year, but we will land on our budget.
To wrap it up, Councillor Lee.
Small point, because this comes up quite often, and it's certainly well meant, but I'm not sure it's entirely appropriate or thought through, and that is the pressure on ATEED to start relating Māori history in its tourism promotion. Promoting Māori culture, language, working with mana whenua, I have no objection to, but the fact of the matter is some of the history of Auckland is still deeply sensitive, and I don't think we should expect our Economic Development and Tourism Agency to get into promoting history. As I say, I'll just make that point. Thank you.
I think that certainly take your point. The issue that we face is that what's happening with visitors is it's no longer about getting the selfie and the T-shirt. It's actually experience that people want, and people want to go to somewhere and experience the people and the history. It's not our job to be the history teachers, but how do we give people the opportunity to experience that?
Member Tarbury.
Kia ora, Mr. Chairman. Minu kia koutou i tēnei wā. If the people of the tribes want to provide the information to have their identity and culture recognised throughout Tangaki Makaurau, well, surely that must be their choice. And who they collaborate and work with, surely it must be a choice of all those parties.
It doesn't require an answer. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mark, Jackie, Nick, and appreciate. And sorry we are late. Andrew and team, welcome.
Yeah, I do. Good morning. First of all, could I present two apologies? One, I'm here out of my sick bed, so if my voice goes, I do apologise. Secondly, apologies for Chris, who is overseas in Australia, I think, this week. Now, I'm conscious we're running a little bit behind, so we could do it one of two ways. We could take the presentation broadly as read and answer questions. Or alternatively, I can ask Jonathan to step through it. I'm in your hands.
Councillors, I'm looking around. Okay, presentation, sorry, but you can speed up on certain things. Yep, you don't need to.
We'll take it quickly if that's appropriate. So this represents a very slight update on the quarterly report because it includes information from January as well. And if we just, without going into the detail, just focus a little bit on the core function or core purpose, as it were, of Regional Facilities Auckland, and that is to enrich life in Auckland through providing the sorts of experiences that you see up here. So arts, events, environment, sports experiences. And as you can see, it's been a busy first half of the year. There's some pretty significant engagement that we have managed to achieve for the residents of Auckland and indeed our visitors. I won't hover on these too much. Oh, my apologies. But perhaps just focus on the fact that we provide both a mix of subsidised and free community events and commercial events aimed to help fund those subsidised and free community events. And as you can see from our delivery to date, the number of free and subsidised events slightly outweigh at the moment the commercial events that we have delivered, and overall we have reached a substantial number of people across Auckland. In terms of our finances, and this is, as I said, a slight update from the quarterly report, we are sitting somewhat ahead of budget, 1.1 million ahead of budget year as of the 31st of January. Nevertheless, we are aware of and focusing very much on some budget challenges we are facing in the remainder of the year, not least as a result of the not realising some of the events that we were hoping to, and the rephasing of some other events that have just been pushed into the next financial year. So overall, we've managed to swallow quite a bit of the revenue downturn, but we are still facing some tension around our budget, around about 1.5 million. We have a number of mitigation strategies in place, and we would expect to be able to deal with all of that such that we come in on budget by the end of the year, but just it was really just to point out to the council that we are having to tighten our belts in a number of different ways and look imaginatively for other sources of revenue as well in order to manage the remainder of the year. If we wanted to look specifically at some of the areas of the organisation, with the art gallery, we are facing some of the usual kind of challenges that are normally in place, the challenging corporate sponsorship market, and the gallery depends a reasonable amount on sponsorship revenues, and indeed international visitor attendance, which is somewhat down on our budgeted expectations now that we have a visitor charge with the, my apologies, with the convention side of RFA. We have had a very limited year as a result of losing some of our significant venues, not least the Viaduct Event Centre, but also as a result of the renovations that we're undertaking in Aotea Centre, which are not complete yet. And so, of course, there's been limited room for growth in an area that traditionally RFA has managed to grow. In Auckland Live, again, the business is performing according to budget, although we have had a couple of shows, significant shows, that have been pushed out into the next financial year. So not lost to Auckland, but just creating some revenue phasing issues for us. Again, we are managing them in-house. And again, with stadiums, it's slightly ahead, but there are a couple of major events that we were budgeting for this year, which unfortunately did not come home to Auckland, but elsewhere in the country. So there will be in the second half of the year some challenges in the performance of stadiums as well. Again, as I mentioned, we have mitigation strategies in place to deal with all of this. Auckland Zoo, again, is performing well to budget to date. It's worth noting that the major renovation program at the zoo is, of course, causing reasonable disruption to the visitor experience at the zoo. We have, again, mitigation strategies for that in place. But it is, I don't know whether any of the councillors have been to the zoo recently, but some 20% of the zoo site is under construction at the moment. And so that remains an operational challenge for the team at the zoo. And the Maritime Museum, our most recent part of the business, if I might say, is flourishing. I believe under our umbrella, there are a whole range of improved process and systems and program improvements that we're able to make available to the Maritime Museum, and it gives them a much more secure basis to plan for the longer term. In terms of the capital expenditure program, we, for the current year, much of the capital expenditure program, which is the biggest we've had to date as RFA, rests in the major projects. The two substantial ones are the zoo program and the Aotea Centre refurbishment. The zoo redevelopment program is on track and is I wouldn't say trouble-free. It's a complicated program, but is going very well. Some of the expenditure is phased a little bit later than we had originally anticipated, but there is no real change to that overall program. The project that is most challenged that we have at the moment is the renovation of the Aotea Centre, which part the way through construction was caught up in the changes of standards that followed on from the awful Grenfell disaster in the UK, which resulted in NBN Council having another look at external cladding standards, and it's caused a very understandable but major disruption to that program and significant delays, and we're still working through those issues. We continue with general renewals works on our stadium network. With respect to the focus areas beyond those that we've talked about, we, as an organisation, have always focused strongly on our engagement in various parts of the business with iwi, and in particular in the art gallery, and with respect to the wildlife conservation work we do through the zoo. We are looking at all of the ways in which we can continue to improve our engagement with iwi and play a key role in representing or improving the visibility of iwi throughout the major event and venue programs for Auckland. And with respect to the sustainability and climate change initiatives, you can see a number that are current at the moment that we're running. It's worth noting that also the Auckland Zoo, as a trial site for RFA, has achieved certification as a carbon zero site, and the intent is to increasingly roll out sustainability initiatives across RFA in that same manner. And as a taste of things to come, you can see a substantial list of events and happenings that we have planned for the coming period. And in the interest of time, I'll leave it there and we can take any questions.
Mr. Chair, just before we do, there's one point that we should raise, which is, again, in the interests of disclosure. Again, with an eye to the tragic events in Christchurch last week, as a consequence, we are having to accelerate security measures at events going forward. We had some evaluation processes in place, and in fact, I think we were moving rather faster than, in fact, the police had expected us to do prior to these events. But it will probably result in some additional expenditure as far as events are concerned. Now, we cannot quantify that at this stage, but I think councillors should be aware that of keeping our people safe is clearly of paramount importance, and therefore it's something that we will be making a priority.
Thank you. Councillor Newman. No, you're right, yep. Oh, sorry, Councillor Watson could go first if you want to.
Just a question on the stadia, but not the hardy annuals that have been dominating things today. QBE Stadium this time. I'm just curious to know exactly what the budget is and what the nature of the reconfiguration of the main field is for baseball. It's in your focus area here.
The reconfiguration's around $2 million.
Okay, and that's in the main stand, I'm assuming.
It's in the main stand, yes.
Okay, and still staying with QBE. If we go to the outer oval, there was a significant investment in floodlights and reconfiguration again in years gone by. It's got an Aussie Rules field there. I note there's one Aussie Rules team on the North Shore, and they have two fields. I'm just wondering what the use of that field is going to be then.
So those fields are actually multi-purpose fields. The ovals, generally you can fit two practice, either rugby fields or soccer fields in them. They do get extensive use. About 80% of users at QBE are the community rather than commercial use.
Do they get extensive use for Aussie Rules?
I'll come back to you on that. Yes.
And just one, two very quick final questions. In terms of that reconfiguration of that outer oval, is that able to accommodate a cricket oval? Originally, when North Harbour Stadium was built, it was a cricket oval with anticipation that North Harbour would form its own cricket team, and apart from Auckland. Is it compliant in terms of international measurements?
We'll come back to you on that as well, but I suppose off the top of my head and from what my understanding was, is that the oval's probably big enough, but there'll be nothing for spectators, there'll be nothing for the facilities and so forth. So,
okay.
Not for international.
Okay, thanks. And just the final question, in terms of the venue development strategy and the stadiums of 10,000, going forward, does that, and it's a question I've been asked, does that mean seats are ripped out, or it's just left as it is? And does it still have the capability to host games even though there's this 10,000 gap? So basically, does that mean that's the end of any bigger than 10,000 crowds? And what does 10,000 capacity mean? Does it mean the removal of seats to achieve that number?
Welcome, Paul.
Morning. Through you, Mr. Chair. The at QBE in particular, the 10,000 is, I guess, a minimum figure of where things are at, and what we're looking at there is 10,000 permanent seats. So that 10,000 capacity doesn't include the grass embankments on either end. It does include a large section of the Western Terrace coming out to fit the baseball oval in, but the ability to actually put a temporary overlay in to the stadium to up the capacity to greater than 10,000 is still there with regards to the temporary seats that the RFA currently owns. So if you look at what happened for the All Black Springbok test back in 2017, the temporary overlay took the permanent capacity, or permanent seating, the seating capacity up to 30,000. So the ability to actually augment that capacity at 10,000 with temporary overlays still remains. In fact, it's probably easy to do with that terrace coming out on the other side of, on the western side of the stadium to fit baseball in.
Councillor Newman.
Yes, thank you. I wondered, and if you don't have the information today, I'd like to get the EBITDA figures for stadia across the group, the EBITDA position per stadia, because that was a matter that came up for debate yesterday. So if you could get that information in slower time on email, that would be good. Also, can you provide any information about the ability to fund depreciation of the individual stadia with the working capital that is generated by the operation of each of the stadia? I'd be very grateful. And if you can do that in slower time, that's good enough. So many microphones on. You might just have to turn your microphones off. And the other thing is, just with respect to the heads of agreement with New Zealand Cricket, can you confirm that given the rollover of Western Springs now for 12 months, that as I understand it, you won't hit your milestones probably for funding for stage 2 at least. So that agreement is probably going to be terminated.
As things stand right at the moment, we haven't had that discussion with New Zealand Cricket.
I understand, based on what I have read in that document, that if you don't hit the milestone, it's terminated.
There's certainly key thresholds in the document whereby each party with the parties can engage and actually determine a way forward once those thresholds haven't actually been met. So there are plenty of, well, there's a lot of ability for that agreement to come to a close should the parties agree that it comes to a close.
Are you putting in any late bids for funding in this annual plan to progress the development of any of the stadia to try and achieve the objectives within the VDA and the timeline in the heads of agreement with New Zealand Cricket?
No, we're not.
Councillor, the only issue that we probably should flag, again, I'm not sure whether councillors saw this, but unfortunately there was a very serious accident at Western Springs on Friday night. We have a driver who is currently in a chemical-induced coma. This crash occurred on turn 3 of the circuit. I understand in the workshop with council towards the end of last year, this issue was raised by at least one driver who expressed some concern about the tightness of turns 1 and 3 at Western Springs and the ability of the more powerful cars to operate on that circuit. Now, I have to say we are not yet privy to the report that is coming from Speedway. We expect that it will be here shortly. Obviously, if that raises serious health and safety issues around the Speedway, we will have to address those. In the event that, and obviously this is, I know, a discussion for council at a later stage with regard to the way forward for Speedway, whilst we have got, at least this standstill for the next 12 months. But if indeed that comes out that there needs to be some work at Western Springs, we estimate it will be in the millions if we have to do work because of the groundworks that will need to be done. Now, that is the only thing that I can think of that may require us to come back to council. But at this stage, it is premature for us to say whether that will or will not occur until we have seen the report.
Okay, I've got some more questions if you don't mind, Chair. Yes, I'm very interested in the timing of any bid that you require to make for capital works at Western Springs for safety purposes. Can I understand, do you have any information about the scale of costs associated that will inform a bid for Collindale Park?
Collindale Park, I think, is not within our portfolio, councillor. So Paul may have some views on that, but we can only comment on, I think, what we have in front of us with regard to Western Springs.
Entirely within the parks debate. Okay, and the one other comment. No, that's all at this stage. If you could come back on the EBITDA and the renewal costs, the ability to fund renewal from the working capital, I think it would be good if we could just, the debates yesterday, we need to get a level playing field in terms of how the estate are performing. Thank you.
Just through you, Chair, I've got some of that information. So from an EBITDA position, Mount Smart makes a 716,000 profit. 716. North Harbour makes a 800,000 loss, and Western Springs a 347 loss. Just bearing in mind, if you're looking at comparing apples and apples, the stadiums which we manage on your behalf have got a significant number of community access and so forth, and that does come with a significant cost. In terms of renewals, I'll refer this back to Ross, but our overall funding, or council's funding policies, is that we're funded for operations and we're funded for renewals, so that comes out of council.
Paul? Just following on from what Simon's just reported, through the 3 stadiums we host over 2,000 community events a year. with attendances of approximately 250,000.
Very good statistics. Right, Councillor Casey. Sorry, you had nothing else? Yep, Councillor Casey.
Well, just to say, first of all, I've been to 2 events at the new Aotea Centre. I went to Shen Yun and I went to Magic Fruit, both of which were sensational. And I think that the new premises are a credit to this council. So congratulations. Looks great if you haven't been getting the door. And my question relates to that. The closure of Aotea Centre and the closure of the Viaducts Event Centre is having an impact both on your ability to meet your target for audiences, but also in your revenue. Can you talk to me a little bit about that, whether you've reviewed your forecasts in light of just the closure? You haven't given us a date for its reopening, so I'm taking it's, well, it's the Aotea Centre's reopened. The other thing I wanted to ask about was, you had the conversation with ATEED about the International Convention Centre, and I still have an issue through the chair. You can keep me right on this, but we have one arm of council promoting our opponents, and by that I mean the International Convention Centre is in the stable of premises, which includes the Viaduct Event Centre and everything else we own. And there was an example just a couple of years ago of the local government conference going to Sky City Convention Centre instead of the Viaducts Event Centre because it was too far to walk to hotels. What I'm asking you about is what effect, you keep telling us that will have a negative effect on your business. How can, and that's my difficulty through the chair, I'm finding it difficult. We'll see the answer to that question, but then I have a difficulty if we've got another arm of council actively promoting competitors. Right.
Through you, Chair. The first part of that question around the Viaduct Event Centre. The Viaduct Event Centre generated 50% of our gross revenue for our conventions business and 70% of the margin. So on average, the conventions business provides a surplus to our group of about $5 to $5.5 million per annum, and we've lost effectively $3.5 million per year. It's not just the revenue we've lost, it's our ability to grow. Because generally when we hire out our facilities, it won't be just for one venue. That the Viaduct Event Centre could be for the convention itself, the Aotea Centre could be for the dinners, and so forth. So it does have a flow-on effect.
The impact of the International Event Centre. Because every time you come here, you say in your reports that it will have a negative effect. You don't write it down, but you do say it. Can I hear more about that?
Through you, Chair. Councillor, it's a little difficult to forecast, but I think what we would say is that our venues play to a different size of convention rather than the things that will be capable of being hosted in the International Convention Centre. Well, inevitably there will be some competition, but we're likely to host the smaller conventions. Now, I think your point is well made that it would be useful if council was, where possible, or council organisations where possible, were promoting the use of council facilities. Because clearly if we make surpluses, as Simon has identified, we can reinvest that money in events for the benefit of Aucklanders. And I always think that conventions are a great thing because you're bringing in generally dollars from outside the city, and if it generates a surplus, we can invest it predominantly for the benefit of the residents of the city. So I think we can probably do better in joining ourselves up with how we promote those things. But I think in terms of the ICC generally, I think we will probably find that it won't actually create too much direct competition with the venues that we have, especially in the short term, as we don't have the Viaduct Event Centre, which would have been our sort of flagship alternate venue.
Don McKinnon's not here, and I've had elephant conversations with Don McKinnon for at least 10 years. Back in 2017, we made a decision at this council table to fund a second elephant from Sri Lanka. That was 18 months ago, and the feedback from you since then has been zero. Now, it was in the courts in Sri Lanka. Sri Lankan activists did not want it to leave. Where is it at now, and what's happened to that budget line?
So, thank you for your question, Councillor. The short answer is that although formally it is still within the council, within the Sri Lankan court system, there have been some changes within government in Sri Lanka which have slowed down a process which perhaps about 9 months ago was looking like it was coming to a conclusion. We have since made some progress in that area, although councillors might be aware that the political circumstances in Sri Lanka is challenging and evolving. But our understanding is New Zealand is in the process, or is just establishing a permanent consular presence in Sri Lanka, and that has helped enormously in the discussions that have been had around this. So our understanding is that we've got a reasonable amount of diplomatic momentum on the ground now, and with respect to that budget is held separately and exclusively for the use of that purpose.
And could you just tell me where the elephant actually is? Is it still in Sri Lanka, or is it in not asylum? What do you call it? It's
in an orphanage, isn't it?
She remains in the orphanage in Pinawala, which is an orphanage for essentially unreleasable elephants, and so she will remain there until and unless we get a chance to provide her a home over here.
Just a reference to your talking about ATID. I mean, ATID's role is to promote equally and without favour all of the convention centres and all of the stadiums. And yesterday we made a decision to actively support a stadium that is not in our portfolio, the RFA portfolio. So that is where we're going, where the council sits, and I think it's a good thing. Obviously there was a debate of how we did it, but it's a good thing. I have Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to pick up on I picked up on the Aotea refurbishment, and that you'll be possibly coming through the annual plan budget refresh in case, to cover the extra expenses there. And then are you also going to come back to us about the seismic supporting structure assessments in terms of any additional costs and time delays with that process?
With, if I take the second question first, with respect to seismic assessments, that in Aotea Centre is one, albeit a minor cause of some of the additional expenditure, but pretty minor, and that wouldn't on its own drive any return to council for funds. With respect to the wider Aotea Centre refurbishment costs, we aren't yet in a position to fully quantify the extent of them. We know that the additional costs are really quite considerable, but we have, in any case, begun discussions with council officers, with Matthew and his team, in order to begin to have a shared understanding of where those costs will be, but we're not quite ready yet to come with a number.
And any update on your seismic assessments? How's it going?
Across the portfolio, the broader portfolio. So we are in the process of concluding seismic assessments of all of the stadia structures that we are responsible for, and initial assessments have prompted some further investigations, We are literally within weeks of knowing the results of those, so it's a little premature to be discussing them right now. So my apologies on that, but we will be able to. We are not expecting significant additional expenditure associated with.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
The stuff that I'm really keen on is I really like a day at Auckland Live where you opened it up to school students. So I wanted to pick up and see, is there any more of that coming through that you're going to do? Opening up to school kids, and could a possible example of something that you could work on be the Auckland Art Gallery? Because I note here that you say you're not likely to meet the numbers, and one of the reasons being international visitor charge. So shouldn't that mean that, well, maybe you should try and encourage the Auckland Art Gallery to look more local so they can build up their visitor numbers that way?
So on the second part of that first, the majority of visitors to the Auckland Art Gallery are local, which is great. We are always, and I absolutely take encouragement from you on this, we are always looking for ways to increase our engagement with the schools and component of our population, and the children and family component of our population. And in terms of the broader question, we do run a whole range of programs. I think we've highlighted that one, but there's a whole range of programs across RFA which are aimed both at school curriculum and non-curriculum based experiences. So for instance, each year we provide school curriculum programs to about 120,000 school kids throughout Auckland. We have just launched, just about a year ago, a very successful schools outreach program associated with the zoo, where we now take, in association as well with Auckland, with Parks Department in Auckland. So we now run wildlife conservation focused schools programs out in Tawharanui as well as within the zoo. We have a long-standing association with a key sponsor of ours, the Warehouse, which allows us to fund entirely the a learning and curriculum-based schools visit from low decile schools to the zoo. So all of these things are dear to our heart, and we are always looking for ways to expand those programs.
Just on that, Councillor, the challenge, of course, is the cost of busing in school kids. So one of the areas that we need to look quite hard at is, can we get more commercial sponsorship? I know that my own business, for example, has bussed in a whole pile of low decile schools to Motat for the latest aerospace exhibition there. And we do the same thing with low decile schools in Otago to go to the planetarium. So there's actually quite a good response generally from corporates to do this, but it's an area we have to, it's about $1,000 a pop to bring a school up to a venue. And it's something that obviously we have limited budget to do ourselves, but it's an area that I think, as Jonathan says, is very dear to our hearts. It's something that we need to do more of to improve the outreach of our facilities for all of Auckland, not just central Auckland.
Thank you. Cool.
Right, we have two more, Councillor Hills and Councillor Darby. Oh, okay, Councillor Darby.
Andrew, thanks for accelerating that safety program that you had been already proactive with as a board in light of the ugliness of Christchurch. Just going back to the incident on the crash on Saturday, was it? Friday, was it? In you're doing health and safety audits of all your stadia. Had that already shown up? I vaguely remember somebody telling us about that. Had that already shown up in one of your audits?
Sorry, through you, Chad. There was an issue, I think we talked about the November 12, I think it was 12 cars flipped on an event at the end of last year. As a consequence, we as a board actually formally commissioned a health and safety review of the site. It, I think, gave us a clean bill of health. From memory, it gave us a clean bill of health. But clearly the venue itself is I think potentially at the margin now, given that cars are more powerful and obviously the site has been there for some time. At this stage, our view is that it is safe to operate. We would not have extended the lease if it had not been, but clearly we are now going to have to get another review once we get the results of this particular unfortunate accident and see what indeed caused that. Now, obviously, if that is apportioned to the track, and I'm not saying it is at this stage, but if it is, then the board will have to reconsider whether we can keep the venue open without remedial work.
And you mentioned you were expecting a report from the Speedway promoter. Would you not also get an independent report, or do you assume that their report is an independent report?
We did get an independent report last time, and what we will do is we will get the initial report and then we will determine whether in fact we need to have a further review on top of that. But we obviously were not present. We want to understand the circumstances of the accident and what caused it, and that then will prompt a reaction from the board. But clearly we are very conscious of our legal responsibilities under health and safety legislation.
Just, Simon, that the template that you might send out on the EBITDA of the stadia under your jurisdiction, I know you gave the answers. It would be still good to get it, and it would be good to identify what the concession value is for the community leasing, to identify what those values are that are foregone, not dissimilar to, I guess, the concession values at Eden Park for cricket and rugby. And I don't know whether you can compare it with Eden Park. I guess you can access their annual report numbers, can't you? But it would probably be nice, easy, clean read to read across the lot. That'd be great. And lastly, Chair, Paul, heads of agreement. Can you just describe why you sign up a heads of an agreement, and then what is that in terms of the staging of forming a relationship? I'd imagine you want to lock down a concert promoter at Mount Smart, and you might sign up a heads of agreement, and then you get to a point where you start talking about the hard facts of the matter and the money and what their obligations are. Can you just take us through what does a heads of agreement do, and then what comes out of a heads of an agreement that really bolts down the numbers?
Well, generally the heads of agreement that RFA or Auckland Stadiums has entered into over the years isn't around giving a framework for discussion between the two parties of actually achieving an end. It's generally around major projects and major long-term venue hire agreements. There's no, just for clarification, there's actually no heads of agreement that gets entered into with regards to, say, concerts or major promotions agreements. So if you look at New Zealand cricket, there was a willingness between both parties to actually have a framework that we could work to, that was clear and concise with regards to where key dates were and where the key decision points could be, where key decisions could be made. And it was all aligned to, I guess, one way or another, to some consideration as to when and if RFA would go to council for funding to support that project.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Oh, there was one more question. Is Chris going to continue overseeing the gallery, given the news?
Unfortunately, yes. Clearly, the situation was somewhat unfortunate in that it hadn't come out in any of the reference checking and was not disclosed by the individual through the process. So we felt it was very difficult to find a way forward from there. So luckily there are some very good candidates who were on the shortlist last time round, and we're starting that process again.
All right. Thank you very much, team. Thank you, Andrew. All right. we will break for lunch, and given the turnout of the staff, the turnout of the councillors, there's probably enough lunch for whoever wants to go down and have it, and we will share it with you, because we're like that. And that includes water care. If you want to come down to the ground floor and have a brief bite to eat,